So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Moses and him and God moving this water around. We're going to get really into it in a different way that people are not used to viewing the situation. Okay. So I've been talking about supernatural people in the ancient world and in the Bible. Okay. And some of these people for God, some of them may have had some sort of supernatural ability, or it's perceived that they might have had a supernatural ability, okay? Other people definitely would have taken the perspective that they did, okay? For example, I just did a video on Samson. I did the logical and the supernatural version, because I'm not here to try to say which one it is. We're just here to talk about it, okay? Samson was really strong, and I went over, was he supernaturally strong, or was he just normally strong? And in this video, we're going to be talking about Moses and the water, okay? Alright? We're going to be talking about Moses, because if there's someone in the Bible who definitely is perceived to have some sort of a supernatural ability, it's Moses. Moses is definitely one of the main guys, okay? Alright? So, and I know what people are going to say. Yes, you should always give the credit to God. Who split the Red Sea? Who made the plagues come? God did. Absolutely. Always give the credit to God. But the thing is, when it says Moses stretched out his hand, and it says Aaron stretched out his hand and his rod, it looks like they're doing it, right? Okay? Now, my question in this video, I'm going to repeat myself a lot in this video. Did God do it? Yes, or did God give Moses the ability to do this stuff? Okay, because it sure sounds like Moses is doing it as well as God. Okay, because it constantly says Moses is stretching out his hand or his rod to do splitting the Red Sea, and also Moses, he made water come out of a rock. Okay, out of that rock, and there's a couple other things that Moses definitely was doing, but he was definitely associated with water. Okay, and I want to know if, and there is a magic ability that people have had since the beginning of time. It's called a hydrokinesis now. Okay, and it goes back to the beginning of time. It's when people can move water with their mind, with the power of a god. Okay, and I want to know if God was just doing it, or if God let Moses have that ability a little bit. Okay, because it sounds, when it says, when it says Moses stretched out his hand and did it, it sure seems like it's not just God, it's him too, right? It'll constantly say that Moses stretched out his hand and he was doing it. Okay, and there's a couple of there's obviously some of these individuals in other religions. There's Poseidon. Okay, there's Poseidon in the Greek and the Romans, and in the ancient Near East they had Enki. Okay, he's just known for the god of knowledge, but in his depictions, he's definitely moving water around. Okay, because when it says God splits the Red Sea, but then God tells Moses to stretch out his hand or his rod to do it, it'll say both. It'll say his hand sometimes it'll say his rod. Okay, and it's very important. There's lots of revelation in that. Okay, because my question is it possible that God just gave Moses the ability to do that through him? Okay, all right. And and I'll just go ahead and throw in some current movies. I know they do water bending in the Asian religions too, and it's nothing new. They don't call it hydrokinesis, they call it water bending. They do it like in Avatar. I think Kungfu Panda, they do it in Kung Fu Panda a little bit. Okay, that they have this ability in movies now, of course. Okay, and so, yeah, so is it just God doing it and it just looked like Moses was doing it? Or what? That's what we're going to talk about today, okay? And, by the way, you should know this, but I am absolutely not promoting anyone try this. Okay, we're just talking about it, okay? Do not try to move anything with your mind, water or objects. Don't do that. I'm not promoting you doing that. I think God may have just let Moses do it. In extreme cases, God does do miracles like that. Or he allows another person to do it, maybe. Okay? Alright. First of all, there are some people who claim to do this now. not in some sort of extreme level where it's like a whole river is being split, okay? But there are some people who claim to be able to move water around a little bit, okay? Of course, you're not supposed to try to do this. It's telekinesis, it's just with water. It's hydrokinesis, okay? And there is a way you can do this using electronics, okay, using science. There is certain frequencies that you can project or make, or machines you can make, that can make water bend and move. It's scientifically possible using machines and frequency machines, okay? And so is it possible, if this is even remotely possible, it's possible that some humans are projecting these frequencies with their mind and bodies, and they can make water move. If this is real, okay, this is how they're doing it. And it's the same thing with the scientists are going to say the same thing with people who can move things with their minds. If it's possible that they are moving things with their minds, it's because their bodies and their minds are projecting this frequency. And because you technically can move things using nothing, using frequency. So if if that's what's going on here, this is the way it's happening. Okay, it's possible that Moses was stretching out his hand or his rod. Okay, he was projecting this frequency to move water. That's the way it was happening scientifically. It's kind of a little bit supernatural and it's a little bit scientific. Okay, all right. These Bible passages are very important, and the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of the Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. So this is very important. Even if Moses wasn't doing anything, they thought that he was doing it. Okay? Lots of people thought he was doing it. They thought it was Moses doing it. Obviously, his hand was reaching out and the water was splitting. Okay? So, and it's possible that God let them think that he was doing it so they would respect him and fear him a little bit. So they would just let him go. Okay? It's possible that God was just like, Moses, put your hand out. I'll do it, but it'll look like you're doing it. You know what I mean? It could have been that could have been God's plan to make it just seem that Moses was doing it. And, you can go back and forth if Moses was doing it, or if it was just God, or if it was both of them. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. And it's very interesting because, as far as I know, Moses wasn't doing that before. I'm assuming he was just born a regular person. And I want to talk about this other Bible passage, okay? It talks about how God told Moses to put his hand in his bosom, and it became very white. And then he put his hand became normal again. There's that very strange Bible passage where God tells Moses his hand became like a leper's hand, and then it went back to normal. And I want to know if this is some kind of symbolism that God gave Moses like a magic hand to project this frequency. Like this is God sanctifying his hand or something. Because that was the same hand he was using to split the Red Sea. And I want to know if God did something weird with his hand. You know what I mean? Did God let him project this weird frequency to move water or what? You know what I mean? These are just things I'm thinking about, okay? And sometimes God does do weird things. That there's definitely Bible passages where some of these guys definitely sound like they're doing something supernatural. Okay? Like Elijah was healing people, bringing people back from the dead. Moses may have been making water move. Okay, he made water come out of a rock. He made water come out of nowhere. Okay, but and I really wanted to focus that he's really associated with the water stuff. Okay, and God does have a theme of giving a portion of what he can do to somebody else on a very small or much smaller level. Obviously, God moves waters around in the Bible. Okay, he caused the flood, and Jesus calmed the waters in the New Testament, right? So these gods telling water what to do is in the Bible, but God does have like a theme where he gives you a portion of what he can do. So is that what's going on here? Did God allow Moses to move water with his mind? I don't know. That maybe, okay? And the whole and anyway, even if that's not true, people thought it was him doing it, okay? Which is gonna be a problem later, okay? All right. Because this all goes into why Satan wanted his body. Okay, you really have to do a lot of studying, and this is like magic stuff. In witchcraft and in other types of magic, if they think you have supernatural abilities, they're gonna want your body for ritualistic purposes. They're going to use your body for your power, basically. And so even if Moses did have supernatural powers or not, that would explain why later Satan wanted his body. Okay? Because back then, if they thought you had supernatural abilities, they wanted your body. Okay? Even if we were to use current information, if you could do any of this stuff, a scientist would come, they would probably dissect you and figure out what you were doing, what's going on, what's wrong with you, or what's right with you, how are you doing this, right? Maybe. You can even add the current information to this. That's exactly why they wanted his body, because they thought that magic energy could still be used even after you were dead. That's exactly why they wanted his body. Maybe they even wanted his hand. He sounds like his hand, something weird's going on with his hand, right? Yeah, that's exactly why they wanted his body, which I'm definitely going to bring up way in another video. I'm going to go into more detail about that, okay? But we're going to add a couple more things I want to talk about. Okay, so maybe he had a magic hand or something. Maybe God gave him a magic hand, okay? But it's also possible that God just gave him some sort of weird rod, too. Okay? It's possible that the rod was doing it. Because it sounds like... Here. It sounds like how, if you read the Bible passage where he throws God's talking to him during the burning bush incident. And then God tells him, hey, look in your hand. And all of a sudden there's like a rod, that rod or staff there. And he tells him to throw it down and it turns into a snake. Okay, if this is very literal, this is not a normal rod. But it kind of sounds, you can take the perspective that rod came out of nowhere. Like he didn't have a rod, and then he said, look in your hand. All of a sudden there was a rod in his hand. And he told him to throw it down. And it's like a trick. It's a magic trick or something. And he told them to go do this to the other... He told them to go do this to the other Israelites, okay? And then he told them to do it to the Pharaoh, right? And then, this is where I'm really confused, okay? And then Aaron has a magic rod, okay? So Aaron has a magic rod, and Aaron's rod was thrown down at the Pharaoh, and it turned into a snake, okay? I want to know if this is all the same rod, or do they have two magic rods now? Does Aaron have a magic rod, and then Moses has a magic rod? Or is it all the same rod? Like, did he just hand it off to him? Did Moses just give the rod to Aaron? That's what I want to know. I don't know if these are two separate rods, or what. And then a very similar incident happens later when they're out in the wilderness. Moses does the same thing in reverse. He picks up a snake and it turns into a pole. It turns into the bronze serpent. Is that his same magic rod? Is there 3 rods now? Is this all the same rod? It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but this becomes a bronze serpent. Later, people started worshiping that thing. That's exactly why, even if it wasn't the rod, if it was just God, not only did they want Moses' body to worship his body as an idol, because that's why they said that Satan wanted his body. They wanted to turn his body into an idol. Yeah, but chopping up someone's body and using it for witchcraft is idolatry. It's a very nasty form of idolatry, but it's still idolatry. And later, that rod became an idol. Okay, because someone thought they were magic. The rod and maybe Moses himself. Okay? And this is very interesting, okay? This is actually very important, too. And there's another thing I want to bring up. So if you read the Bible, it talks about not only did these rods turn into snakes, they brought the plagues. If you read the Bible, it says Aaron stretched out his hand and rod, and then one of the plagues would come. Or it'll say Moses stretched out his hand and his rod, and the plagues would come. So is this some sort of like multi-dimensional rod reaching machine that reaches into the other side and pulls down frogs and stuff? Like, what the heck is this thing? I want to know. It's obviously pulling animals from another dimension or something, okay? And that's a whole other can of worms I want to talk about. Where do these animals come from? Like, were they just coming out of thin air? They just didn't, like, the manna from heaven? They just, where did they come from? Or did God, like, teleport them from a different part of the country? And then they were there? But the rod, it sounds like the rod is doing it. And it doesn't matter if God was doing it. People thought it was the rod, and they thought it was Moses, and that's why they started worshiping those things. Okay? And it's possible that it was one of the rods. It's possible that God just gave him that tool, that one time, to do this. Okay? Alright? Even though you're not supposed to be doing it. Don't do any of this, obviously. Okay? And it's very important because one of those rods, Aaron's rod, I think, ended up in the Ark of the Covenant, which is very, very important. Okay? It had to be hidden in their secret place because if that thing was magic or something, no one else was allowed to touch it. Okay? Alright? And yeah, this is all very, very important because from a Christian perspective, we're like, yay, miracle from God, and it is. That's actually the perspective you should take. God was doing it. It's possible that God was using these tools to do them. Okay, maybe. Okay, yes, God was doing it. Give glorification to God. Okay, but if that rod really was magic, or the staff was magic, it would make sense that they had to hide it in the Ark of the Covenant, and only certain people could touch it or use it. Okay. And that thing actually, to us, you think it's really holy and stuff. Yeah, but that thing actually sounds pretty scary. Okay, and the Bible even tells you that they were scared of this thing. It tells you in the Bible that people were scared of Moses. Okay, well, yeah, I understand why. That's maybe, even if it wasn't the rod or anything, that's why God did it. They needed to build respect for Moses. Instead of thinking he's just this wimpy holy guy who was just going around giving hugs. Okay, because he wasn't. Okay, keep in mind that these things were killing people. Okay, Moses killed the Egyptians. And I'm not trying to say Moses was evil. I'm trying to say God gets very serious sometimes. I know everyone thinks these guys were super holy, and they were, but they were given permission to do some very scary things. Okay? Alright? That rod sounds scary. It turned into a snake and started eating other snakes. And it brought down the plagues from Egypt. Okay? It's not like this innocent, like, oh, it's just a holy rod. I'm like, no, that thing's very dangerous in the wrong hands. Okay? It's very scary. God's power is scary in the wrong hands. It's scary in the right hands, too. And here's another way you can view the situation. It's possible that Moses already knew how to do this a little bit. Okay? And then over time, it was amplified through the staff. Like, God amplified what he already knew how to do, and that staff God just gave him the ability to amplify it. Okay, like he magnified what he already knew how to do. It's possible, and I know these are weird concepts to think about. Okay, I have to bring up one more thing. It's very interesting because I reread the plagues, and it'll say Aaron did it. He did all the other plagues before. Aaron lifted up his rod, and the plagues came. And it's not until the hail, which is water, that Moses says he'll lift up his hands and did it. Again, it's connecting Moses controlling this water, or it seems like Moses is doing it, or God is giving Moses the permission to do it. You understand what I'm saying? It's the water. And also, I would like to remind everyone of this weird time in the Bible where it sounds like Moses is making the Israelites supernaturally fight well. Like it says he'll lift up his hands and his rod during the fight with the Amalekites, and then they won the fight. But he had to keep his hands up. Is there something supernatural going on here with Moses and the rod? Like they just became supernaturally strong or fast or something, and they won the war? Like they became really good fighters as long as Moses gave him his energy or something? You know what I mean? So in conclusion, did Moses have some sort of a magic ability? Did he have a magic hand? Did he have a magic rod? I don't know for sure. If it was if God was just using that perspective that other people thought that they were using these things, yes, give the credit to God. Okay, and I'm not promoting you try any of this stuff or do any of this stuff. Okay, but you can add current information to this. It's so funny because Moses technically broke the 10 Commandments. literally, but he literally did break the 10 commandments, some of the commandments. Probably the biggest one as well, he did commit murder. Okay? He actually murdered one of the Egyptian guards and buried him in the sand even before he left Egypt. He actually murdered someone before. Okay? And I know I am not promoting you to go commit murder, but under certain extreme circumstances, God might allow it. Okay? Like if you're a soldier in a war or something, you might need that perspective. I believe you can be a soldier or a police officer and commit murder and still be saved by God, okay? And still be protected by God. Because Moses was doing that. No, he was. He gave him permission to do. It's the very exact same thing that happened with David and Goliath. Did God give David permission to kill Goliath? Yes. And he had a stone in his hand. So David had a stone in his hand. Moses had a rod in his hand. This is boundary talk information. He was giving them permission to do something that, under most circumstances, you're not allowed to do. Okay? Do not go around trying any of this stuff. But you can add the more current information. Like, you might have to use your magic rod, G-U-N, okay, to do this sometimes under extreme circumstances. Like if you're a soldier or for a police officer, or if somebody breaks into your house and tries to kill you and your whole family, God understands that you might have to pull out some Moses stuff, okay? Magic rod stuff, okay? Okay, and, I'm gonna go ahead and doing some myth stuff and like what this reminds me of a little bit. It reminds me of the Garden of Eden, of when God gives an angel a flaming sword. Alright? Okay, keep in mind that I'm not saying that this really happened, but it just reminds me of the myth. Okay? According to Joan of Arc, she said God gave her some sort of magic sword to make her supernaturally fight, I guess, maybe? And she was able to fight in her war, win her wars. Kind of like the Amalekite thing, maybe. And I don't know if that's real or not. I'm just saying it reminds me of that. This definitely reminds me of the Hercules story. So Hercules is out and about, conquering monsters or whatever, and the gods will magically give him magic weapons. The god will just make them appear out of nowhere. So that kind of reminds me of Moses and his staff. Okay, like he's the only one allowed to use it or use it properly. Okay, that happens in the Hercules myth. All of a sudden, the gods will just magically make weird weapons appear in front of him, enchanted weapons, to conquer the monsters. It reminds me of that, but it also reminds me of the sword and the stone. Okay, you only had very special permission from God to touch it or lift it up or use it from God. Okay, and it reminds me of Thor's hammer. He has some sort of magic hammer to travel between the realms or whatever, but he's the only one allowed to pick it up and touch it. The sword and the stone and Thor's hammer sounds a lot like Moses and his staff to me. He's the only one allowed to touch it and use it. Okay, and of course I'm not trying to get you to. I'm not promoting you try to use magic, but you can use, the GUN thing if you want to become a police officer or a soldier. With God's permission, you're allowed to do that stuff. You can use that comparison, okay? Because I think you can be a Christian and have to do something like this if you're a police officer, right? Like kill somebody under extreme circumstances, even though that would be terrible still, okay? But under extreme circumstances, that might have to happen, and you should still be protected by God if you're a Christian, okay? Anyway. So please think about this stuff, guys. I will continue I'm going to do another video or two about this stuff, okay? Anyway, until next time, thank you.